There's several issues I've noticed recently with games, and it just keeps getting worse. Everywhere I look, I see games releasing that are unfinished, unoptimized, and just garbage. And then maybe some years down the line they get fixed. And then you see an outpouring of the devs care. Forget about the past. I keep seeing this. I do not like it. I see it right now, actually, in the Game Awards. We can look at all the categories, of course. We can see Alan Wake making the board, which I see Cyberpunk 2077 on there, and you'll hear more from that in a later patch, actually. I see Jedi Survivor on there. One of them, of course, is for best performance, which, fine enough, that's about the actors, not the games, and that's respectable. But that one is special to me, and I will touch upon that, I think, in about 6 patches or so, maybe a year later, maybe not, maybe I won't ever touch it again, maybe you'll just have to live with it in its current state. I don't care. Let's talk about the main issue at hand here, DLSS, and I know I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but FSR and XeSS exist. That's Intel and AMD specifications, but DLSS is the one that everyone knows right now. The DLSS initially came out in February 2019. Interestingly, DLSS came around the same time as ray tracing did. If anyone remembers that, it was literally just, here's ray tracing, you are not going to get frames for it. But it's like, we have this new technology out called DLSS, so you can render your game at a lower resolution, and we use AI upscaling. If I recall correctly, the DLSS model they used then was not able to be used across a lot of games. It was just very, very specifically trained on some games, and so seeing its performance on other games was kind of bad, and everyone at the time was kind of like, this is okay-ish. DLSS 2 basically brought that back. It was like, this will work now, and it was great to see. So DLSS is deep learning super sampling to do real-time image enhancement and upscaling. In human terms, it runs the game at a low resolution and then uses neural network AI magic to upscale it to make it look better. So it takes that small image and does what like a bunch of crappy apps do now, just like, oh, we can take this old image and make it look better. And then you look at it and it's like, it's okay-ish. It's a little fuzzy. That's the big thing for me. DLSS always looks a little fuzzy. Basically, there was less load for the GPU, because you're rendering it smaller, and then you use the AI cores on the new RTX series to upscale it, so it's like a little bit less for the GPU to work for, and that's fine, and that makes sense. I keep seeing it now in the worst usage, and I hate it. Let me tell you, first off, whenever you use DLSS, it's visible. Everyone knows you're using DLSS, okay? If they show it in all the promos, is it like, oh, it looks better, you get triple the frames. It's like, yeah, but you're kind of lose a lot of graphical fidelity, because again, you're rendering lower and then praying to God that this algorithm works and makes it look good. I don't think the broad amount of consumers can strictly tell. I can. And I'm mad. Am I the issue? I might be the issue. Once you get DLSS in a game, you of course have another option to fiddle around with. You have like performance, quality, super performance, balance, tons of other random stuff that really doesn't make sense unless you really dive into it deeply, and no one wants to do research to play their goddamn game. So one game that deeply irked me on this. Jedi Survivor is a game made by Respawn Entertainment. It was launched April 28th of 2023. I played it on stream. I had a good time, but I hated it, which sounds really weird. I don't know how I can say I played it on launch and I hated it in the same breath, but here we are. Because the game played really well. I enjoyed the mechanics of the game. It's really fun. You feel like a Jedi. And it's dope, and then sometimes you have a pistol, and so you're like a desperado cowboy Jedi, and it's wild. But holy shitballs, trying to run that game was an absolute nightmare, even with their recommended FSR. And let me tell you, FSR is not seen as good as DLSS is, because I think NVIDIA has a lot more at their fingertips to train their models to make them run better, and that's fine. So Jedi Survivor launched, and it was this unoptimized mess, and just, I played through it. God, I hate seeing double-digit FPS numbers, and I know that sounds very pretentious, but when I say double-digit here, I mean like 10, 15 FPS on my computer, which is considered to be very high-end, because I figured with a higher-end computer, I should be getting better performance out of my game. That doesn't seem to be the mentality anymore. FSR was directly integrated into Jedi Survivor on launch. The issue is you couldn't actually turn it off or change it in any way. It was a known bug of the game. When you change FSR in the menu, the game would not look different. You could not turn it off, you could not disable it, and so it was always on, and even the performance was shoddy. What? Apart from that, I had to crank down everything to low and play it that way. Sure, whatever, could barely hold 60 FPS. What annoys me the most is that a couple months later, like 4, 5, 6, does it matter? Patch 7, September 5th, they eventually added the option for DLSS integration. That is absurd to me. Like, even then, all those months after it, in the patch notes, they specifically state you will get a solid 60 FPS in performance mode if you're on a console with these new options. What? They should not have released it in a broken state like this, trying to lean on FSR as much as they could, later DLSS as much as they could. I mean, thankfully they didn't go out and just say that maybe you need a better computer. That would be a really stupid idea. Wait, I think a dev did that recently. What was the game they made? Oh, right, it was... Starfield is an action role-playing game developed by Bethesda Studios and was released September 6, 2023. It made this list for all the wrong reasons. First off, you have an amazing interview with Todd Howard, where he says,
"Why did you not optimize this game for PC?"
We did. It's running great. It is a next-gen PC game. We really do push the technology, so you may need to upgrade your PC for this game, but it's got a lot of great stuff going on in it, and the fans are responding awesome.
What? I have no idea why any developer or any leader of a studio would say this about their audience of, hey, are you poor? You should try upgrading. That's weird. This is a bold stance to take when every building has to reload a new scene because you're using the creation engine, which actually, and I learned this today, and this may or may not be true, was first developed for the Nintendo 64. Here's something that I find is really, really interesting as well. FSR was included by default. They were paired directly with AMD, and so people complained that FSR was not great. Here's the wildest part. Modders started adding on DLSS. That's fine. Modders are meant to do weird shit like that, and it works really well from what I understand. But what makes it even more insane is that devs have later come out and said, okay, we're going to add DLSS in a later patch. What? Why? Just make your game run better. You shouldn't have to just keep adding on this band-aid here. Granted, I'm not a dev, I'm just a moron on the internet, but I like my frame rate to be high when I play a game, right? I don't want to have to add all this superfluous stuff. I care about my frame rates. And speaking of frame rates, our next game talked about this a little bit, that being... So, Alan Wake released recently, and I played the first one. It was...
dope. It worked.
Did it? It's alright. Now, I haven't played the second one yet, because at this point, I can't trust a game on release to run as expected, which is kind of stupid, but what do I know? Typically, the strategy for gamers right now is to wait a while for the bugs to be all patched out from release, and then maybe pick it up when it's on sale for like, I don't know, 50% off, maybe even more if you get Game of the Year edition. So all this superfluous DLC is also included. Fun times for gamers. Before the game came out, they released a spec sheet, and that's fine, that's expected. They did something extremely weird with this. On the spec sheet for any category, they put DLSS/FSR, so strictly speaking, for any part of their game, you need to have upscaling. That is absurd. Granted, all the specs on the spec sheet are running at 1080p or higher, including 4K, but the requirement for that is absurd. But I would have much preferred it if they literally just came out and said that our game runs like ass. You need to use magic to do it properly. That would have been great. That would have been nice. Something I hate seeing, by the way, for these trends, is that on the spec sheet for the very top end, you need to have something like a 4080 for Alan Wake. The 4080 just came out, and I'm pretty sure it came out after the game had been in development for a while, right? So the idea that you've been deving this whole time and a card comes out and you're like, that'll hit top step, is just weird to me, right? You can see the tech coming out of there and think, hey, let's use it. But then there's also seeing the top end Ferrari coming out and saying, let's raise the speed limit for all cars. that doesn't really work out, does it? There was also some hilarious discourse from the communication director to tell people to stop fixating on frame rates, which is weird, but to also just play the game. So I can understand where this is coming from, but also I like having a high frame rate when I play games. My monitor, this one, can go up to 240 FPS. I like seeing that number. I paid for the whole monitor, I'm gonna use the whole monitor. It's weird then seeing a game like Alan Wake say that they're targeting 30 frames per second. Holy crap. It's absurd to me, again, that they put a 4080 on their spec sheet and then say we'll target about 60 FPS maybe? Stable, with upscaling. So the game came out and it does run okay-ish, but it still feels like we had a lot of promises leading up to launch and being like, this is gonna be the best game to ever look at, and it runs just okay. But like, I can think of a game that had a great hype period and then completely crashed and burned. And that game is... So Cyberpunk was originally announced in May of 2012? Absurd. It was followed by a wild trailer in 2013, showing this weird, wild game that really kind of blew expectations up immediately, and unfortunately that game doesn't exist. Actually, after this, they had a dead period of about 5 years where they showed nothing, then came back to E3 with more trailers, and then kind of went back and forth on a release date for a while. Even then, this game was winning awards left and right of Best Game, Best Upcoming Game, Best PC Game, Best RPG, Best of E3, Best Game to ever exist that you can play someday after Star Citizen. This game was basically just going to be the best thing that humanity had seen ever, all time, forever, ever, forever, never. There was a huge juggle of release dates for this game, of it coming out on, we'll say, April 16th, and then getting pushed back to September 17th, and then getting pushed back to November 19th, and then one more time to December 10th. I have no issue with the game being delayed, and the famous not actually said quote of Miyamoto, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad until you patch it and then everyone forgets. When it was released, it released in such a poor state and was hated on so much that most people believed it was actually just a crossover and that Bethesda probably developed the game as sort of like a prep for them making Starfield. The game was lacking so bad and ran so poorly, it was actually pulled from PlayStation until they get it to a mostly stable state, and it was an absolute shit show. Time has passed now. And we look at Steam now, and we can see that Cyberpunk 2077 has very positive reviews. Granted, on launch it was like about 75% on Steam, and overall we can see that the reviews get better and better. That's important to note here, is that on launch this game sucked so bad. Optimization was not even a word in the vocabulary, but people liked it because the story was good, the music is good, the acting in it is good, and it's a fun game. It just ran like ass. This is what makes 2077 special. This game is currently being nominated for Best Support. What? It keeps popping up whenever Nvidia makes some sort of modification to DLSS or new technology they want to really show off. It was a flagship for ray tracing. It was a flagship then for path tracing, DLSS 2, for DLSS 3, for DLSS 3.5. This game keeps popping up. It's actually a benchmarking tool still for GPUs and some extent CPUs to see how well this game can run on the system. It is insane what they keep pushing. So touching on DLSS 3 and 3.5 and whatever current state it's in, they added frame generation. And frame generation was, of course, shown in 2077, where all new NVIDIA stuff goes to get tested. Sure, whatever. Main point here is that frame generation works by interpolating between two frames and making a new frame, completely free of actually rendering out anything. So DLSS 3.5 launched, and so then we got path tracing support and all that stuff from 3. But then we also started to get ray reconstruction. So now the ray tracing cores aren't actually doing anything, it's all shafted over onto AI. So at this point, we're barely rendering out the game with DLSS. We're just letting the heavy lifting go to the AI, while the GPU just kind of leads the AI there. And I am getting so tired of it. I just can't get over it. Something I wish that studios would do is look at something like the Steam hardware survey. and look at what people are using in their computers. The top card right now is an RTX 3060, a pretty decent mid-range card. Something important to know is that the fresh and mighty and new top performing card, the RTX 4080, is at a mere 0.62%. It's pretty significantly small. And of course, the 4090 is right under at 0.61% as of time of recording this. But what makes this even more funny to me is that the RX 580, a card that came out in 2017, is at 0.72%. PC gamers are not all rich people, apparently. Shocking, I know, but people just typically buy the card that works to play a goddamn game. We don't play it at ultra ray tracing highest. I think even the small minority of people who have these cards don't play it at that high-end range. The point of DLSS originally was to be able to scale these games down, use DLSS, get higher frame rates, and maybe play them at some absurd resolutions like 8K or something if you really could push it that far. Developers, or more likely the studio heads, saw this technology and went, we can just utilize that instead and push our games that way. They saw that and said, we don't need to optimize it as well, we can just let a third party do it. Which is such a stupid idea. A really, really dumb. Even then, with this let the third party optimize it, they're still aiming for just 30 and hopefully your computer runs okay-ish with it, which is just mind-blowing and I hate it. DLSS should be used to push things, to make them look insanely good on mid-tier rigs and help out, the average guy. We don't all have god rigs, and it should not be a requirement to play a game at 60 frames per second to downscale it to 720p and maybe barely get the performance we're looking for. I want to play my game natively and not have to rely on a third-party tool to look good. That's all. That's all I want for Christmas this year. That would be fantastic. I don't even want like a new GPU, because if I buy more of them, games companies will look at that and then go, well, people are getting the high-end ones, so let's bump the specs again. It's absurd. It's 2023 here, and we're rendering games at 720, and that's normal. That should not be normal. I want to play 1080p on a game. Let me do it.